And I'll be moderating this lovely talk. So welcome to this fantastic talk that we have lined up for you, which is called Women on Wheels, A Silent Revolution. And I have with me two fantastic panelists here today, so I think the conversation is going to be very interesting. So I'm just going to give you quick introductions of this lovely panel. We have with us Ma'am Syeda Henna Babar Ali, and she has an extensive career in the private sector in Pakistan. She's been with the Packages Group since 1998, where she has launched multiple brands over there. She also serves on the board of very prestigious organizations such as WWF Pakistan. And in a delightful twist, because she's so multifaceted, she also happens to be a poet. And she has published several books in English and Urdu. So thank you so much for being with us. And she's, of course, an ardent supporter of women empowerment in Pakistan. So thank you. And we have with us Mr. Salman Sufi, who is the architect behind the Women on Wheels project. And he's the founder of not just Women on Wheels, but has recently also founded the Salman Sufi Foundation, which has an extensive range of projects ranging from Women on Wheels to Saaf Bath, which is something that deals with sanitation and hygiene, and as well as the Safe Campus project that he has initiated. He's been one of the most vocal supporters of women empowerment in Pakistan, and the fact that, I think it's very important to mention that being a man in this society and being a flag bearer of women empowerment is really, really important. And he has some wonderful awards that he's won, the Voices of Solidarity Award, and of course, the Mother Teresa Award in 2018. So thank you so much for being with us today. Yeah. And just a brief introduction of myself. My name is Nayab Jan. I'm a women's rights activist. I currently run an organization that focuses on microfinance and the extension of enterprise loans to low-income women, and I also do a little bit of advocacy for women's rights and other social issues on the media. So thank you so much for being with us, and I think we'll start this conversation. So Salman Sahab, I'm going to start with you, because I think everybody wants to know sort of the origin story of Women on Wheels. So, let's talk a little bit about what are the challenges that women face in our society today, particularly when it comes to access to mobility, right? Because just to give everyone a little bit of background, mobility is so essential because it links to so many other different rights. It links to access to education, to healthcare, to economic empowerment. So, this is something, and it's something that I feel like hasn't been stressed enough in public discourse. So please tell us how this idea originated, what research went into it, and how then did you design this project to tackle that?
Thank you very much, Nayab. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us here. Basically, Women on Wheels is a very simple concept, but unfortunately, when we are in this region, and especially in Pakistan, mobility has never been taken seriously when it comes to women. They've always been seen as someone who has to sit beside a man just to get somewhere. And that has really hampered not only the women empowerment initiatives of Pakistan, but also the economic output that Pakistan could have achieved if women were given the power of mobility. Just like, we eat, we go out, we look for freedom, mobility is as important as that. But unfortunately, it was never being stressed upon that when you go outside, even now, you'll see tons of boys on motorcycles, because obviously it's a very cheaper way of transportation. Not everyone in Pakistan can afford a car. So the idea came about when we were working in the strategic reform unit of the previous government, Punjab government. So we used to see that first of all, there were hardly any women in government offices. And secondly, when we were trying to get them employed, mobility was one of the main reasons that they were saying no because of refusing the job because of that they didn't have the transportations and the means to get to the office places. So we realized that there has to be some grassroots movement that has to be developed, which everyone can not only afford, but the government can stand behind. So we came up with the idea that let's train girls and women on two-wheelers, and then we can help them with subsidized motorbikes. So this can bring them not only into the workforce, but also help them just being independent. Because just imagine how suffocating and frustrating it would be that you wake up in the morning and you're waiting for your husband or your brother or your son to take you around. If you have to go to a doctor, you have to wait all day for someone to come home and take you around. So men, unfortunately, in this country have failed to grasp the frustration that women went through since 1947. So this was such a simple intervention, which unfortunately was never carried about. So we just started with, with a simple radio message from the traffic police that we're going to train women on motorbikes. And we were very apprehensive that I don't know if somebody will join us because obviously we belong to a very patriarchal society. But to our delight, when we went to the first training, we had over like 60 girls already there, and including women from all ages. So that showed us the potential that we had. So then we designed it accordingly that we reached out to female colleges, we reached out to schools, especially government schools, and we reached out to private sector that if they have some women in their workforce, we can train them so they can be better equipped and they can have a good career going forward, because mobility is the number one reason that they don't have that career. So then we started that, and then Women on Wheels was, and the main reason I would say this on the record, that political support is very much important for any reform that breaks stereotypes. Until unless you have the political support, which we did in the past government, you cannot introduce these changes. So this was only possible because of the support that we had, and then we were able to train over 5,000 women just in a span of 1.5 years all across Punjab.
Right, excellent. And I think your point about political support is very important, and I'll come to that later as well. So ma'am, I'm going to come to you now. You've been a supporter of this project, and also I think one key question that I want to put to you is, you have had this extensive career in the private sector, and we've seen increasingly that the private sector is taking on more responsibility when it has come to sort of social welfare programs, etc. So how do you view the role that the private sector has in such programs?
Good morning. Thank you very much for all of you being here and inviting me, Nayab. The private sector, like all other private sectors and public sectors all over the world, will only do something if it makes financial sense. And having women in business, having women employed in management and working on the factory floor does several things. One, it improves the general environment, working environment. We are all compliant with the harassment laws in this country. Number two, it creates an openness in the management and on the factory floor, which is not there before if it's an all-boys club. And number three, it brings in a fresh and new perspective to the boys club, which isn't there before, because women will have a tendency to be a little more creative and intuitive, and funnily enough, when it comes to financial decisions, women are less emotional than men. We have seen this time and time again, and there is plenty of data which all the top business schools in the world have put out, that women have a tendency to be more data reliant when it comes to decision making, taking of financial decisions than men, because men get emotional about it. Fortunately or unfortunately, their egos are much bigger than ours, because we have been trained to control our egos since childhood, whereas their egos flourish because of patriarchal societies, not just in Pakistan but all over the world. There's a boys club in the corporate sector which is very hard to break. And this is in the most developed countries as well as in the underdeveloped countries. At Packages Group, we have a fundamental in-house agenda that we would like to have 15% women in our workforce, in management seminars, we have a robust mentoring program, and the reason why we are supporting Women on Wheels and why I personally got involved with Salman's project is because we have introduced the pick and drop service, because we realize that to get women and retain talent, it is important to provide them with transportation. It is important to have daycare facilities in-house on our manufacturing sites so that they can bring their children and then they can go back and see them during the lunch break or, whenever they get time or there is a need to do so. These are all avenues that are perhaps new for the corporate sector in Pakistan. But we have to start somewhere, and this is just a small and humble beginning.
Excellent. And I love the point about rational decision making by women. I think that's fantastic. It's excellent to break those stereotypes. So Salman Sahib, I'm going to come back to you. And this is one question that I've personally had, because I've seen this project from the beginning, is that now you have both perspectives. You started this as something, when you were inside the government, and you just mentioned having political support is so important, and I completely agree with that. It's in order to achieve critical mass, it's very important. And now you're doing it as, an active member of civil society. Completely different. So I really want to know what are the differences, the similarities, and especially the challenges now that you're doing it as an independent member of civil society.
Actually, it's more liberating doing it as a civil society person, because when you're in the government, you have a lot of bureaucracy to go through. Fortunately, with the political support, we were able to overcome a lot of that. But when you're doing it as individual, you have more room to play with. When we started it in Punjab, and unfortunately it was ended in the current government in 2018, so we decided that we will give them some time to maybe realize the impact of the project and restart it. But when we didn't see that happen, so we realized that this project is important enough not to wait for the political will anymore, because it has already taken root in the society. So we decided that we will, start it independently. So the challenges were, first of all, to get more support, because obviously it requires finances to expand the program. So thanks to friends like Henna and other corporates that help us with this, we were able to start our first session in Karachi. And it actually got a way more massive response, because then the Sindh government came on board and they fully supported the project to be expanded all across Sindh. So then, and our registration drive went way up. So the difference between working with the government and working independently is, the only thing is that you don't have to face the bureaucratic hurdles that you face. And fortunately, in today's Pakistan, it's a very heartening feeling that you get a lot of support from the civil society, which is a very, very major component of Women on Wheels. So when we launched it, we got so much response, an overwhelming response, that now we're expanding it starting in March in Lahore, and then we're moving on to Islamabad and Peshawar in April. So our goal is that by 2025, independently, we want to train over 500,000 women all across Pakistan, which will be then plugged into the economic workforce. And then we want to create Women on Wheels. So with this question, I can plug this in, that now Women on Wheels is way more than mobility, because we have realized the potential that it gives to women. So Women on Wheels is going to develop into this ecosystem in which there's going to be this one place where women can come and they can get mobility, they can get vocational training, and then we'll have friends like Packages Group and other groups that we work with who will develop their customized jobs, which we can announce on that website, and then women can directly apply to those jobs. Because right now, connecting them to the employers is the biggest hurdle that we face. So with this economic ecosystem that we're developing, it will be a game changer for Pakistan, and this will be a very, very different Pakistan 5 years from now if we are able to continue this way.
Right, excellent. But I'm going to sort of play devil's advocate just for a minute. There's a school of thought that believes that without that transportation and mobility is the government's job. It has to come from within the government. So, and you know, there's a lot of people that also believe that by doing these initiatives, by having these initiatives, you're kind of distracting or sort of not letting that pressure accumulate on the government to sort of provide this, right? So I'm going to pose this question to you, ma'am, that do you think that the private sector can match the strength or, you know, the resources that the government has in all of its, the structural power that it has?
I'll give you a very simple example. Look at the private sector in education in this country. They have certainly outstripped, outsmarted, and outmatched all government efforts, and are producing some of the best students in the world who can get into any university in any country abroad. I'm not trying to condone government, but I think government needs to do its basic job, which is to manage the finances of this country and to keep the economy and the political life on an even keel, and to allow freedom for people and corporations and the social and civil society to do what it thinks is best in the interest of the citizens of Pakistan. I do think transport is such a big issue in this country with 220 million people. Given the limited resources that government has, I doubt very much that if we wait for government to intervene, they can solve this problem completely on their own.
Right, excellent. And just this question that I want to pose, once again, sort of playing devil's advocate here. There's a lot of people, and we were discussing this earlier, that there was a time when I went with one of my teams to sort of talk about, you know, women getting scooties, and we went to a particular university. And one question that someone posed to me there was, you know, like, why shouldn't your efforts be focused on public transportation or mass transportation, given that there's, with what you're suggesting, that's going to increase the carbon footprint in a city that already has so much traffic. So introducing more private vehicles, you know, is something that might potentially, you know, be bad for the environment. So do you think it's an either-or situation? Like, how do you view that?
First, I'll touch on your previous question. First of all, you have to have a government that believes in fundamental rights to bank on the government to do that. So, I mean, like, that can be a political answer, but that is the sad reality, that you don't always get the support that you need for these kind of initiatives. And if we are to wait for someone to come in and then, you know, have this idea that, yes, you know, women have the equal right to be on the roads and reclaim the public spaces, then I think in 50 years, my son will be sitting here talking about the same thing and will be at the same place. So that's why private sector has to come in and involve themselves, because otherwise, as Henna said, we will not be anywhere when it comes to women's mobility. And when it comes to your question about the carbon footprint. So basically, right now Lahore is the only city in entire Pakistan which has a good public transport infrastructure. And that is only also available from one place to another, but it's not spread out as it's supposed to be. So that is a question that we have to ask ourselves, that should we wait till another mass transit project comes in and then we make our women dependent on that, or rather than provide them with these motorbikes, which also now come in electronic form. So it's like they're e-bikes. We just started this MOU with this delivery service who are introducing e-bikes. So the concept is that you give them the mobility and then let it take root. We are not supposed to, government is never a solution. Government is always a problem, number one. We have to let these ideas take root, and then people will come up with their own innovative measures to take it forward, considering the society that they live in, and also taking care of the carbon footprint, because obviously we breathe this air as much as the government. Governments are mostly in GOR, in those nice houses where, you know, there's like trees and everything, but we are always on the streets. So when it comes to public and when it comes to citizens, they will come up with innovative measures to make sure that the carbon footprint point is tackled on.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. I think the e-bikes and the solar bikes and a lot of those innovations really are on their way. That's excellent. So I want to move this discussion now to also this broader question of just visibility and access to public spaces, right? Because I think that's what this debate really boils down to. So the first question when we speak about visibility and access to public spaces, particularly for women in Pakistan, is the question of security, safety, and harassment. I think this is one of the questions that even when you were designing this project, you must have had to ponder over it for a long time. So I'm going to need a perspective from both of you. I think, ma'am, you working in the private sector, harassment is now pretty much on, the agenda everywhere globally. You've been working there. So how can we, once we're introducing these changes, how can we ensure that these changes take place in a safe way?
So as far as the harassment laws in Pakistan are concerned, within the packages group we have sensitized men and women to the harassment laws. We had a speaker from ILO visit us last year, and we invited the men and women within our management to come in and listen, and then that cascades, of course, you invite somebody as speakers and then you cascade it across the group. Because we have 10,000 employees, it's impossible to have everyone on the same arena at the same time. The other is that we have a very strong whistleblowing policy when it comes to harassment, and the harassment committee reports into the internal audit, which reports to the board independently. So harassment is a very serious issue. We take it very seriously, and the CEOs of our various companies are immediately informed by the audit committee and the harassment committee if and when any case arises. So that is how we are tackling it within our group. And of course, we do have some issues. The issues pertain to women as well, especially when they come from conservative backgrounds and they're engineers on the floor. They like to wear, flowing gowns and everything on the factory floor. So it requires a certain amount of counseling and training, that you can certainly wear your hijabs on the factory floor, but the gowns are not allowed because they get into the machines, and that can create physical handicaps in the machines and injuries as well. So they have to be sensitized to that we are not trying to condone what you are wearing, but the factory floor discipline requires a certain attire, and they need to adjust to that. And then they can wear anything they like when they are outside the factory floor.
Right. So I guess, awareness and sensitization is a huge part of it. So the same question to you, Salman sir, but you have to, it's different sensitizing people within an organization and sensitizing people within a country and within a larger public space. So how, when you were designing this project, did you mitigate the risks for security and safety?
Harassment was a big challenge that we thought we were going to face when we started Women on Wheels. So we designed a couple of initiatives to attach the training part with it. So we introduced safety training, anti-harassment training when we give trainings to Women on Wheels. But coming back to my original point, that sometimes when you start things in society which are breaking the stereotypes, it takes a little time, but then they do take root. My friend Saber Saab is sitting here. He's a very esteemed cartoonist. I remember he made a cartoon for Express Tribune when we started Women on Wheels, in which it was showing that before Women on Wheels, these guys are sitting with scruffy hair and, unshaven and with smoking on the motorbike. And on the second slide, it was like when women started driving, so they're all dressed up and nice and on the roads. So the change does come into play when you start these things. So the harassment issues was there, so we introduced an app. And when we were in the government, we connected that app with the Safe City because our unit drafted the law for the Safe City. So how that app works is that it is on your smartphone, and you can not only mark the places unsafe. So if you're driving around Mall Road and you see that there's a certain spot where there's eve teasing or there's some issue happening, you can mark that spot unsafe, and then the Dolphin Force used to come, for help. And then also, you used to have that intimation that you can call for help if you are being harassed and if there's an issue with that. And then we introduced a couple of courses for the riders as well, that in case you are being followed, where are the spots where you can easily go, which are more public places? And then how do you report it, and how do you mentally adjust to it? Because post-trauma rehabilitation is most important. Like, you cannot stop harassment even in developed world. Anywhere you go, harassment is going to be there. But the issue is that how do you counter that, and how do you train the women to fight back and then be more strong, and not take that into account for limiting them from being mobile. So these were the couple of things we did with that.
Right. I mean, that's excellent. I think any change takes time, and I think when you're in that transitional phase, that's when you sort of face the most hurdles, and things start, once they take off, it happens. So when I was thinking about this talk, I think one thing that came to my mind was, right across the border, this particular thing is so normal. Every time I think of women on scooties, I think about India. You go to Amritsar, you go to Delhi, everywhere you're going to see women riding scooties. And oftentimes we say that, the culture is so similar. So what do you think, what happened? I mean, what are the differences that happen there? There's also, by the way, I was just looking at it, there's also, because of this, there's a huge variety, the ranges of the scooties that they have, because they have local manufacturers, they have so much stuff going on. So it's a completely different landscape right across the border. So, I mean, I'm going to start with you, ma'am. What in your opinion, what are the critical differences that allowed public spaces to become more open?
In India, I think one of the things that has happened is that women in our country also have freedom, there they also have freedom. But women have been participating in the workforce since a much longer period of time, and because they are a secular country, it gives them the freedom and the space to do so. Given the current situation where all that is going on in Kashmir, and you've seen the remarks by women against the new immigration civil laws that Mr. Modi has introduced. I don't know how long this space is going to be open to women in India. And there is very little information that one is seeing flow out of India, because they are trying to cut the internet and social media as well. So I would like to reserve my comments for the future and the present, because we are living right now in an uncertain time, and it's very difficult to predict which way this is going to go. As far as Pakistan is concerned, I think what Salman and myself are trying to do is basically be role models, and we would encourage other members of civil society as well as government to take this project forward for not just women on wheels, but for transport for women in general across this country. You've seen Airlift come in, they've done an IPO for $18 million, and they're extremely successful. That is again in the private sector. Similarly, if Women on Wheels takes off, somebody on the entrepreneurial side will get brighter ideas of how to grow the segment, because we have 52% of the population which is women, and not only just living in urban areas, but 60% of the population is in rural areas where transport basically means walking from your one destination to the other destination. Now, if Women on Wheels were to go to the rural areas and give them freedom of transport there, the first question would be is how can they afford it? The next question would be, is this sustainable or not as a model? Um, so I think a lot depends. This is just a pilot that Salman and myself are involved in and are initiating. But we would encourage the civil society, other entrepreneurs in the corporate sector, as well as the agrarian sector to come forward, because this involves mobilizing 52% of the population.
Right. I think we'll take a small comment on India, and then there's a couple of other things that I want to ask.
India is a very different example because in India, democracy was the number one thing that encouraged these kind of programs, hands down. Even in their 50s or 60s and 70s, these kind of programs were promoted and encouraged by the government with their own ministers and politicians using motorbike as a very easy way of transportation. And it was never frowned upon. And I will connect that again with my political point that Women on Wheels only was able to take off because the government showed interest. Our law minister in the past government, Mr. Rana Sanaullah, he's known as a hardcore, politician. But I remember when we launched this program in Faisalabad, which is his home district, I requested him that if you can join us in the rally. And he agreed, and he sat on the bike and he led the rally of these 100, 200 women. So that just one image of this law minister sitting on a motorbike with all these women just shattered the images that people had about the government and how government looks at these kind of reforms. Because whenever you change a society, these kind of revolutions, if the political support comes in, it happens. And that's why you're seeing all this change when you cross the border through Amritsar. You see, a whole new world. And that's why they have this manufacturing. And coming to the point of private entrepreneurs, this is a huge market that is untapped. Only out of 1.7 million vehicles registered in Punjab, only 1% are registered in the name of women. And out of that 1%, only half of them are being used by women, and most men have registered them in their wife's name or their daughter's name. So that is a huge market that is out there. And if these women are mobile, so just imagine all these industrialists that they can put up units and they can start, the economic activity, which could not only benefit Pakistan, but also, the citizens of Pakistan.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important point. I mean, there are some key differences in their trajectory in democracy. So I want to come to sort of a couple of concluding questions, and then we'll, take a couple of questions from the audience. I want to talk a little bit about certain technicalities. So what happens is there are a couple of things in our experience, what we've seen. We go to a university, we go to a workplace, we talk about something like Women on Wheels, we talk about something like you should have your own ride, etc. And there's this rush of enthusiasm that comes from the girls that are sitting there. And then the next day, when we follow up with them, they've gone home and the male guardians have denied them permission. This is a huge problem. It's a huge issue because even right now, men are gatekeepers, and particularly with younger women, you have to take permission for these things. And in my own experience, this has been something that has really sort of halted the progress of things like that. So first thing is, what strategies do you use to convince male guardians? But also, there are legal hurdles. Being part of a financial institution, I know that women who want to purchase these bikes cannot do so without having guarantors who are male. And so even if there's a woman who's ready, who has permission, who wants to do this on her own, she has several legal hurdles. So how do we navigate through this?
When we started the subsidy program in Punjab for the motorbikes, this was one of the biggest hurdles that we faced. There was no legal barrier, but because of the job situation, if a student wants to apply for a bike, she has to provide the credentials of her father, who's going to pay the installments of the bike. So that was the number one reason. So it's like a debate that, how do you get them to that point in which they can be seen as the guarantors, which will only come obviously after they have a job. So the first part of your question, that how do you convince the male members of the society? You don't convince them. You show them that, this is the way forward. And the girls that we have trained in Punjab, they're mostly from rural areas. And once we launched the program I remember I visited this small area, it's called Balwal in Sargodha. And when we launched the program, there was like this huge skepticism that, that our girls will be, like they'll go out on their own, there'll be no one to watch over them. But once we employed street theater campaigns. So we hired this small group of street theater performing artists, and they used to go to villages and small areas and perform and show that how it helps. And I remember we planned a skit in which we showed that there's this father sitting in home and he's having an active heart attack and there's no son at home. So this girl comes up, she straps him, and then she takes him to the hospital. So that really shook them that, this can really happen, and this does happen. And so these kind of things you show them, but you don't ask for permission. The time for asking permission is over. So because if we keep on asking permission, we will be having the same discussion over and over again. So you show them the output, you show them that how it changes the society, and then you let it take its route.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And I'm sorry to cut you, but this actually happened then in Karachi when we launched Women on Wheels. This woman from Bora community, she came on the stage and she said that I actually saved my husband's life because I knew how to ride a motorbike, and he was having a heart attack, and I took him to the hospital, and only after that, my entire family supported me, which were like, before, against me, that why am I riding this? So with examples, this thing will take root.
Yeah, excellent. Definitely, I think that, and the point you made about imagery is very significant. There's this image in my mind of the magnificent, the late Asma Jahangir, who's sitting on one of these bikes, and it's fantastic. So I'm just going to come to a couple of concluding remarks. I'm going to go back to you, ma'am, and I'm just going to sort of, if we talk about the future, what are you seeing, what role are you seeing companies playing? You've spoken about airlift, we know that Uber is here. What role do you think, if this is something that takes off, do you think this provides more incentive for the private sector to jump on in and not just in terms of being partners sort of financially or, in that way, but also partners in terms of this advocacy and the media and the imagery that you want to project?
I think more and more the corporate sector in Pakistan realizes that they have a social responsibility to be socially responsible citizens of this country. We are seeing that when it comes to in the environment, when it comes to our industry, which is paperboard and packaging, and we particularly see that when it comes to employing women and creating gender parity in the country. So I think that as transportation, employment for women, and creating gender parity across the corporate sector becomes more important, you will see more and more solutions to transport, not just from the corporate sector, within for themselves by providing pick and drop services, but you will see many more airlift solutions and Careem, Uber solutions, women on wheels solutions emerging because there's a demand for that. And my request to government is to let the free forces of market demand and supply operate rather than try to over-regulate them. Because the more over-regulation you have, the more dysfunctional the system gets. So when you deregulate and when you allow the market forces of supply and demand to function, the economy will begin to flourish, and women who are less empowered will become empowered, because the main source of empowerment is financial empowerment before you can politically, emotionally and psychologically empower them.
Right, excellent. And so just the final question to you, Salman Saab. So we want to know what the future holds for Women on Wheels, and I want to focus on a couple of things. One, who and what do you see as the key stakeholders going forward, and how do you plan on developing sort of synergies between these stakeholders? Because see, you can't have a fragmented infrastructure where there's one private system here and another service here. So, and I know you've already started that because you've started with Careem, etc. So building synergies, building relationships and taking it forward. How are you seeing it?
I'll answer your final question with introduction of some, how Women on Wheels works. If you can please play the video. Excuse me?
Yeah, just We want to play the video.
So these are the women on wheels that we're talking about today. These are the women that actually broke the stereotypes. These are the women who were failed by the society. They were told that they have to sit at home. They were told that they need a male, but they took on the responsibility on themselves to train themselves and be part of Women on Wheels. These are the women that show the actual Pakistan that we're trying to achieve. These are the women who actually tell us that anything is possible if you have your heart into it, and these are the women that we should support. These are the women who will tell you what Pakistan will look like 10 years from now, and the Pakistan that actually Qaeda-e-Azam wanted to see. When Qaeda-e-Azam is seen in the government buildings, this is the Qaeda-e-Azam that wanted that these kind of women, 50% of the population is the backbone of your economy, and this is the only reason that Pakistan is going to be the economic superpower that we all listen in policy speeches, but we never get to see. So this is the ecosystem that I'm talking about, and I think this video explains your question very aptly, that when you see all of them on the road, Pakistan will be an entire different ball game.
Yeah, so I think we've had a lovely discussion. We've talked about all the different stakeholders, public, private, safety, security. So at this point, I think I'm going to open it to the House. And if there are any questions that you have from the panelists, you're free to ask them.
Thank you very much. My name is Imran Niazi. It's very encouraging to see this happening, and I would love to see in not 5 years, but 10 years, like what we see in Vietnam, where it is just women on the road on scooties. The question that I have is, you touched on two challenges. One is the social challenge at home to get the permissions, and the second bigger one, I feel, is the social challenge out on the roads. So and you talked about some ways to get it overcome at home. What are you planning to do on the social scene outside?
So on the social aspect of it, when we launched Women on Wheels, when we started privately, we most likely, when we're doing in Sindh, is that we do different kind of seminars, and in which we are trying to invite the male members of the society as well, in which we tell them about the program and the impact it has, and also the impact that it can have on the entire household's financial health. So that helps. And plus, when you see more women on the road, it also creates a very ripple effect, which becomes normalized. I can tell you that 2-3 years from now, there were hardly any women on Lahore roads or Karachi roads, but now you see 1 or 2 on each road, like from day to night. So that helps change the society's mindset as well. So because it's such a big problem and it was never addressed for like these past 60, 70 years, so it's going to take its time, but our goal is that to involve more corporate CSR from these corporates and do more of street theater, do more of seminars in different colleges, and especially male colleges, because that's where the problem is. So we are targeting not just girls, but boys as well, because it's the boys who need to be educated. Girls know their rights. It's the men who need to be told what those rights are. So what we did was that I drafted the chapters in Punjab textbooks that now from grade 9th through 12th, all these girls and boys read how women's rights are enshrined in the Constitution, how are they given in Islam, and how women have equal rights as men. So we're starting from that, and then we take it to the society from there.
Thank you very much. I'm Victoria Schofield. Obviously coming from the West, I ride a bicycle in London. So I wanted to ask, we've talked about the difference in India and Pakistan. Is it a cultural thing that it's sort of it's unladylike to be astride a bicycle or a scooter? And then the other thing is, we, of course, in the West are always terrified when our young go on motorbikes because of accidents. So how, where is the preventive aspect in terms of securing accidents? I was delighted to see them all wearing helmets. I mean, that's an absolute key thing. And still, you see people on the roads here without helmets. And thirdly, you mentioned the program has obviously gone into Sindh, but what about Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan? Equally devoid of public transport. Thanks.
Thank you. So your first question, that's exactly what the issue was. Like, it's unladylike to sit on a motorbike. That was the main obstacle that they used to face, to which we used to answer that if she can sit in the back, why can't she sit in the front? Like, it's a very simple answer to that. But the complicated answer is that it's decades of patriarchy, it's decades of misogyny. So, the women that you see, the Asma Jahangir rally that you're talking about, that was our first rally in Lahore, and we only had like 60 girls. And we did it right here in Alhambra, and I think Asma Jahangir was there, Ingrid, I think you were there as well. And so when that rally came out, it was just, the entire country was shell-shocked that, what is happening? Like, how is this being supported by the government? And the government is actually telling girls on to ride the bikes. So that really created the ripple effect, and then it created that system in which people started to think that it's okay, because we have girls who wear hijabs who ride a bike. We have girls who wear jeans who ride a bike. So it's never about the dress code. That's the education that we're trying to give. That you can be anyone, you can be anything. You can be a transgender, you can be a guy, you can be a girl. You can dress as you like, but this is mobility. This is about your basic right in reclaiming public spaces. So number one. Number two, as you see in our rally as well, that safety training is the number one component, that we are partnered with Honda, we are partnered with other various organizations who have master trainers who provide safety training to these young and old women, and we provide them with a helmet after every training. So it's not like that we don't apprise them of that, and that is a major component of that. And your third question was about KP and Balochistan, so that's where we're going in April. March, we're launching in Lahore and Islamabad, hopefully, and then Peshawar and KP in April. And that's where exactly we need, the corporate help to adopt centers, because what we do is we open a center in a college, and then we ask the corporates to market it and brand it, and then, basically adopt that center. So all of the women are being trained there, and they're being adopted by the corporate company that is sponsoring them.
I think there's also, I just want to add, I think you also have to be prepared that, of course, there are going to be mishaps, right? It's not going to be complete smooth sailing. There's going to be cases of harassment. There are going to be cases of, unfortunate incidents like accidents, etc. It's about how people like you, if you're prepared and if you have your narrative with you, then you control that and you tell people that there are hurdles along the way, but you have to keep going. Any other questions?
Thank you. I think it's wonderful to see all these women on the motorbikes, and I agree that when people see them, they'll get used to it. So we don't need to worry too much about that. But I do feel that the issue of acceptability also is linked to this fact that you're exposed to the public. And men are not used to their women being exposed physically. So just thinking that, are there any plans to make a different kind of model, maybe a modified motorcycle or a rickshaw where you could actually have some kind of more comfortable environment for the rider? It could still be a woman riding the bike, but some kind of contraption where it's a different, not totally exposed to the public. The nearest thing I could think of is that people are very familiar with rickshaws. So electric rickshaws are on the road now. So any plans of modifying the design or offering alternative designs? Thank you.
The design is up to the, it's a big exercise to change the design. It takes 3 to 4 years for a manufacturer to change the design of a motorbike and put a plant here, like Honda, like we were discussing with them. And that's why they're partnering with us, because they're testing the market, and they are seeing the potential that there is. So that is our goal, that we're pushing different companies in China, different companies in Japan to put up plants here for scooties, which are, more comfortable, you would say. It's a debate of what you like. For me, a girl can also ride a motorbike. The stigma is just the stigma that, it's a guy's thing, that, that's what people used to say when we launched it, that how will she sit on it? So I used to say, how do you sit on it? They say, at 8 p.m. if her tire punctures, what will she do? I say, what do you do? So, it's a amount of, it's acceptability. And with this, the ecosystem that I was talking about, that's our next step, that we're training, also offering training of being mechanics, motorbike mechanics to these women, so they can open their own workshops. So if in each area there's a Women on Wheels workshop, which is run by women, so it's going to be much easier for those women in the near future to access them anytime they want. So it's a step-by-step thing that we're trying to do.
To your question about men don't feel safe about having women in public places, or they don't feel safe about having women publicly exposed, I think that is a concept that we need to do away with, because if Hazrat Khadija could feel safe being exposed to all the men in Arabia when she was a businesswoman and a trader, there is no need for men in Pakistan to feel that women are unsafe when they are in public places.
I'm just saying that it's a public acceptability matter.
Well, I think the public needs to change its mindset. That's what Salman and I are working.
I think whenever you're launching things like that, you have to have your own limits to how much you're going to bow down to sort of backlash, and then you sort of have to take a stand. But I mean, it's a valid point. Anyone else? You? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm still a student and I go to school, and I understand the fact that you're trying to educate men in terms of having women on the road. My biggest problem is that how do you deconstruct that belief system that people of my father's age would have? What can we do as men to support this? Because there is a lot of backlash from women and men who conform to patriarchal norms.
It's very simple. You go home, you grab your motorbike key, you give it to your sister, you start training her, and then you show your dad that, that if I'm studying or something, she can just go out and get the chores done. She can just go apply for a job. So it starts with a very simple step. There's no formula for it. It just starts with the, your own, starting from your own boat. And what Henna was saying, this was actually a question when we launched this. So there was this huge debate between the right wing and the left wing of Pakistan. That one question was posed about this, that, how will a woman do this? So just like Henna gave an example, so there's an example of a war in the pre-history of Islam when Hazrat Aisha led a war sitting on a camel's back. So, so just imagine 1400 years ago if this was happening, we're actually going back. So that is something that needs to be told, that, it's not about a Western idea, it's not about an Eastern idea, it's not about Islam or non-Islam, it's about basic human rights. Women's rights are human rights. It's not about feminism, or it's not about men versus women. It's about basic human rights that every human being on this earth has to have. If I have the power of mobility, so should you. If I can go out at night, so should you. If I want to apply for a job or go overseas for studies, so should you. If I want to wear jeans, so can you. So it's about basic rights. It shouldn't be divided into or compartmentalized into men versus women thing. That's why we always fail.
Right. Any final questions?
Assalamualaikum. I really like your talk. It is for my life
period of my life experience, this is the first platform that is being discussing women rights, especially on such solid arguments. I had a long list of questions, but almost all of them are covered. But still, I have. You talked that our government is a problem. You gave an argument. But if the government is a problem, why do we elect them? And do you really think that the government understood the basic human right? And if you are talking about that harassment apps are being activated, do you really think that dolphin police are really helping those people who are being harassed? I don't think so. I personally has experienced so much times as going on my own to university, to other places. I informed the authorities, but they said, shut up, close your mouth, you are not allowed to speak. This is Pakistan and you are not supposed to speak on such matters. You're a girl, be down, let them go. What you say to that? Thank you.
Very good question, thank you. Your first question, why government is a problem? Government is a problem because government needs an entire infrastructure to just sustain itself. And that becomes so complicated that they forget that they are being elected to solve the problems of the civil society. That is why I always say the government is a problem rather than a solution, because it takes them years just to sustain themselves. And then if they find time, then they think about it. Women on Wheels, it's such a common thing. It's not something that's rocket science that girls should also be able to ride a bike. But why was it not done? Because the people who are developing the policies for Pakistanis are not facing the problems that Pakistanis are facing. So how do you expect them to develop and design the programs which are your need or my need? So that is why we created this unit, the think tank, it was the first think tank in Punjab Chief Minister's office, to give a civil society's perspective that these are the things we need. We don't need big policy speeches, we don't need big seminars, we just need these small interventions that can help millions of lives. So that is where I propose, and I always talk about it, for alternative governance system, that there has to be a civil society component in the policy making, because the CSS system, the bureaucracy system is so insulated that because everyone knows each other. They pick up the phone, they can get everything done. How would they know that what is your problem and what problem am I facing through? So there has to be an alternative system that is ingrained with the policy making circles that can tell them that, okay, this is what they need and this is what we need to provide them. And with your question about harassment on Dolphin Force, I agree that it has, I'm not in the government anymore, but the problems have increased because of the lack of political will, I would say. I would just leave it at that, because then it will become too political.
All right. Do you have a follow-up question? Okay, we just one last one and then we'll have to wrap up.
You talked that we should train girls how to face harassment, how to overcome that, actually. But don't you think that we should train men too, how to control their impulses, their hormones, their emotions? There should be some programs where boys should also be addressed how to control their own impulses before imposing them on women.
That's exactly what I just said, that's why we added the chapters, right? So the chapters, because you have to start with education. You cannot fix anything till you are educating them from the start. So in our 8th through 12th, we increase the intensity of the information from 8th grade to 9th grade to 10th grade. So we tell them that, okay, your sister has the same rights. These are the laws that are available to her. You are supposed to respect her point of view. You are supposed to give her her rights. So and I absolutely agree with you that women, that's why, the point was that women know their rights. It's the men who need to be taught what those rights are and how to respect them. So that is where we're trying to do, and hopefully we'll succeed one day.
Excellent. Yeah. So I think with that, we've come to a close. Thank you so much. It was such a lovely discussion, and I think on an ending note, we just have to say that, change is hard, but it's people like you who make it happen, and I think anyone who wants to see this change in society has to be there. And I think women now know that, the ball has started rolling, so I don't think it's going to stop. I think we're all on board and it's going to happen. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you enjoyed this.